在这个我们介绍讲者之前，我们有几位现场的贵宾，他们蛮难得的，今天来到我们的现场。有一个非常特别的，就是Steve Chen 的父母亲，请站起来跟大家挥挥手。The parents of 陈世俊 Steve Chen， 真的非常开心，他们可以来现场。然后我们有徐宏庭市议员，City Councilor Member 徐宏庭 ，he's in the back. We also have a few members from AIT. Maybe you guys can just raise your hands. Okay, thank you for joining. 还有我们来自美国的这个学者 Maggie Lewis, please also wave your hand. 好，还有我们这个非常重要，也是美国这个百人会，还有这个W.I. Harper 创投的这个创办人，我们欢迎刘宇环刘先生。还有也是同样来自我们矽谷帮这个 Kai 跟 Samantha 来那个跟大家挥挥手，对。好，那如果我没有这个唱名到的，那就这边跟一跟各位来致意哈。好，那 I'll switch to English. Tonight, the format would be in the first hour, we will have an hour forum or debate on these three issues. And then Andrew Yang will come online around 8:30. He will give a 15 to 20-minute speech and followed by 40 minutes Q&A with the fellow panelists. So this is format today. And allow me to introduce today's speaker. First of all, let's welcome the president of American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Leo Seward. Please come on. And also Vice Chairman of National Policy Foundation, Mr. Sean Lian. Maybe you sit over there. Yeah, sit over there. And co-founder of YouTube, Steve Chen. Steve, you must sit over here. Yeah. Sit over here, yeah. And also, next we have Shirley Lin, non-residential senior fellow of Brookings, and also from University of Virginia. Welcome. And her husband, Harry, is here with her today as well. Yeah. Welcome, Harry. Next, we also have a very young rising star and in the venture capital industry, Mr. Charles Wu from GSR Metrics Venture. And I'm your moderator, so everyone please sit down. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is a quite exciting time and also quite uncertain time as we kind of, sail through the tumultuous 2020. So why don't we start by asking each of you who happened to be in Taiwan or who decided to be in Taiwan, what's your current observation or aspiration or outlook of the rest of the year and going forward? You can talk about things you concern, you can talk about the issues that you are worried, or you can talk about the projects that you're working on. So let me start with Sean.
Well, I didn't choose to be Taiwan. My family's here, so I'm actually I'm very glad that I'm here with my family. If you ask me about the matters that concerns me the most, or I should say my top priority issues, that I think is the border reopening. Okay, we are actually we have been in sort of border lockdown mode for more than roughly 10 months, 8 months. 8 to 9 months. And this year, because of the pandemic, COVID-19, obviously, you have no choice. I mean, you just have to stay here. It's relatively safer here in Taiwan. Although many people now, when they go away, they got they become confirmed cases in the country. But then overall, we're still safer here. So people say, fine, I'll put up with this because this is really this is a very dire situation everywhere else. But coming in the next year, Taiwan is a sort of an export-driven economy, and a lot of our people, whether you're in trading, whether you're in tech or in many other businesses, it really requires people to travel. Okay, not for fun, but for business, for survival. So without a viable vaccine or some sort of treatment, I guess it's almost impossible to reopen our borders. And so far, I haven't seen any clear policy of Taiwan that indicates when or how can we open our borders. And this is something that really worries me because if we continue this lockdown mode until next year, I'm talking about another year of lockdown. I cannot imagine how difficult it will become for our people here in our economy. So that's, if you ask me, this is the top, sort of utmost concern for me going forward.
I see. How about you, Leo?
So I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to put a bit of a more positive spin on things. I've been in Taiwan 10 years, and I really think that Taiwan is at a golden point in time. COVID is affecting us all, and it's affecting the whole world, as Sean said, and that's understandable. But if you look at the whole world from a geopolitical perspective, Taiwan right now is at a perfect opportunity to really take hold of some of the advantages that are coming its way. And when I talk about that, I mean the geopolitical shift, particularly between the US and China, the supply chain shift that we're seeing many of the member companies that we have and we're seeing globally, where people are looking for alternative places to produce and source their products other than just China, which was much more the case in the past few years. But also the fact that Taiwan has handled COVID so well has brought Taiwan to the forefront. And that's something I really notice when I talk to colleagues around the world. You know, the old joke, people used to confuse Taiwan with Thailand. That doesn't happen so much anymore. People know about Taiwan everywhere, and they know how successful it's been handled here. And this recognition that Taiwan has is really giving us an opportunity that we'll hopefully use to build Taiwan. When you look at the people who are here in this room, there are a bunch of COVID refugees in Taiwan. There have never been so many COVID refugees, there have never been so many high-powered people who are camping out in Taiwan during this time. And the more we can get them together, the more we can talk about some of the issues that Taiwan is facing and the advantages that Taiwan has as a business place to do business, the better Taiwan will be. Going back to the geopolitical thing, the American Chamber has been looking to negotiate a bilateral free trade agreement with the United States for many years. It's been in our white paper for 10 years. For the first time, I think that next year will be critical for that. And I think that we can take some important steps that way. So I'm very optimistic, notwithstanding all the negative stuff that COVID is bringing. It's also given in Taiwan a really golden moment. So I'll stop it there now, but that's basically my view.
Just on the other note, Leo is originally from Canada, but he actually get a Taiwanese citizenship. So he's actually a Taiwan-ren. So let's give him a round of applause. Steve, you've moved to Taiwan for a little bit more than a year now. What's your current view on things?
No, exactly. So I came back I was born originally in Taiwan, but moved over to the U.S. when I was in second grade. And I started third grade in the U.S., and I was there for about 30 years, and I came back last year. So just a little over a year ago, I moved back, myself, and the rest of my family, including 2 kids. This was still in the August period of 2019. So this is still months before everything that we're seeing, both with what's happening with the Trump administration, what's coming up with the upcoming elections, and then most importantly, what's happening with COVID. And I think COVID on an international scale, where we, along with a few of the other folks that we knew coming back from New York, coming back from California, even in February when it was starting to just hit Taiwan, and it still as far as Trump was saying, with 0 cases in the US, we were actually already talking about packing up our bags and moving back to California, moving back to New York at the time. But, fast forward a few more months, and I just read an article about Taiwan going 200 days without any local COVID cases. And so most of my friends that I know, they're coming back and they're going through 14-day quarantines now, and they're trying to get into Taiwan. And this includes, I think one of the main reasons that I came here to Taiwan was to reignite for myself. I spent 20 years in Silicon Valley, and I was there from the PayPal days, the Facebook days, YouTube, Google Ventures. And it was always coming back to Taiwan for a lot of visits and talking with the local Google offices and the local engineers and seeing that there was a lot of talent here. However, when it came to the core entrepreneurs and when it came to actually starting the companies, there was something amiss. At the same time, in Silicon Valley, there was a large group of specifically Taiwanese American entrepreneurs that were very successful. And many of them now are coming back to Taiwan. And I think that this is a very good opportunity to be able to glue these together, to be able to grab the entrepreneurs that are all coming back every week. More and more of them are coming back to Taiwan, and then to be able to work with the engineers here in Taiwan to be able to start something here. So I'm looking forward to, in the relative larger grand scheme of things, we're still waiting to see what's coming up in the upcoming elections next week with COVID. But in terms of what's happening in Taiwan, I can't think of a better, more exciting time to be here right now.
Wow. I think that's deserve a round of applause too. Thanks, Steve. Shirley, you've been kind of an international traveler, kind of observer, originally from the financial industry and now in academic, and you care a lot about Taiwan for education, international exchange. What's your view?
You can see Jason already teed me up to say a specific, he rigged this, and I think actually the perfect thing that Jason did as an old friend was he probably doesn't know when he invited me. So this is my 3rd time quarantine. I just got out of quarantine, so you're all safe. But I choose to be here. I'm not a refugee. I could be in 3 other places where I'm all teaching and online doing things right now. So I go home tonight and I have another Zoom call at 10:30 p.m. So life as it is very hectic. It doesn't matter where I go. But I choose to be here to teach a short course for National Jinju University. And 2 of my best students are here. And also I'm happy to say 2 of my colleagues from investment banking, venture capital days are here, Joyce Xu and Jessica Chow. So it's really great to be here. But the reason that it's perfect for me to be here, Jason, is because I almost went to Columbia and I almost went to Stanford. And I applied twice, 3 times actually, for both schools, business school, law school, undergraduate. And all 3 times I decided not to go. But I still deserve to be at the alumni meeting here. And the second thing, of course, you can see I'm the only woman. So let me tell you about what I'm concerned about. I'm very concerned about the topic of my next book, which is called The High Income Trap in East Asia. The high income trap is really what we're talking about. And the COVID-19 situation is exacerbating all of the trends in these wealthy societies, including Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, United States, the UK. And that is inequality, which will be exacerbated with COVID between countries, within countries. Taiwan, actually, I do comparative work for both Brookings and the Miller Center, which is the think tank at University of Virginia. We look at all the issues that the president faces, and therefore it's a whole range of social, economic, as well as financial issues. But basically, high-income societies like Taiwan cannot compete with lower-cost countries like China, Cambodia, Vietnam, and therefore we're losing jobs. And I think Andrew Yang, his book is fantastic, you must read it, has a lot to say about this. I don't fully agree with everything that he proposes, and I know many of you will talk about UBI. I will skip that part of the theory, but I think it's very important for us to recognize the new normal is basically what the topic is about. New economy, new society, new politics is about the new normal. And what is the new normal? The new normal is that we have become a high-income society with more inequality, more financialization, more inequality between gender, and therefore, as technology improves, we lose jobs. Women are not the ones who are becoming tech billionaires. And with COVID, more and more women are stuck at home, homeschooling their children, taking care of everything with very little social welfare. So we have a whole host of things that I think Taiwan can be a leader of, can advance, and can show the world that it is not just beating COVID, which will be a temporary issue one day once the vaccine comes out. But Taiwan can do more in showing the world that it has solutions to the trap that the United States is in. And that's what we're looking at. The difference between Trump and Biden is they have totally different solutions to the high-income trap. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Thank you very much, Shirley. Charles?
Well, first of all, I'd like to mention that I feel honored to be here with all of you distinguished guests and to discuss these extremely important topics. For me, I also think it's a good opportunity for Taiwan due to the US-China tension and also the ongoing pandemic. Currently, the global tech supply chain is under a massive reorganization due to China and US tensions, and the world is going under a massive transformation. So I believe this creates a lot of opportunities for Taiwan, and because Taiwan has such a well-industrialized supply chain for technology. And also, I think the pandemic has facilitated a faster growth in fields such as remote economy, AI, and online social commerce. I think these three things industries are very important because the physical scale of a nation matters a lot less compared to having an open society. And I believe these three industries create a great opportunity for Taiwan. So,
Thank you, Charles. So let's talk about U.S. election. Trump, raise your hand. Nobody? Really? I thought Taiwan has the most Trump fans. Probably not in this room. Oh, one person, Trump. Okay. Sean, I know you're a Trump fan. Biden, raise your hand. Okay. What about on stage? Trump, raise your hand. Die-hard fan.
If you're American, raise your hand.
So, Shirley, let me begin by asking you, you're probably the most deep into analyzing U.S.-Taiwan politics. What's your assessment of a Trump re-election and a Biden administration, its impact on the U.S., Taiwan, and China relationships? And everyone can chime in. This is
I'm sure I will
feel free
be
to chime in.
challenged by this very superior panel, so I'm going to say very little that's controversial. But I think the first off is, of course, everyone's very focused on next week, and our schedules are all packed with different kinds of standby discussion groups and op-eds that we have to write. But I think the most important thing is, of course, Taiwan in terms of this new normal. The new normal really that we're talking about the last 5 years is as US and China decouples, we're entering a new normals in terms of the geopolitics. And Taiwan is a price taker in geopolitics. We are not a price setter. Therefore, one of the topics that Jason had asked the panelists to consider in his full preparation for this is whether this is good or bad. I would contend that there's nothing good or bad. We just have to adjust. And there's no other choice. And what we need to adjust to is that it's not the president of the United States that matters the most. The Congress has changed tremendously. The Senate, whether it turns or not this time, is very important. Senate, the senators, the congressmen, as well at the House, and of course we know about the Supreme Court changing. But basically the American people, if you look at the Pew polls, have changed so much in the last 5 years. So the new narrative is, of course, China is more a competitor and a threat than a collaborator and a partner. This is very new. For the last 30 years, and I recommend you to read my husband's book, which is much better in US-China relations. But basically, the last 30 years has really challenged the American economy. And as they move into a new situation, Trump basically, the last 4 years, and I teach at the University of Virginia, which is founded by Thomas Jefferson. And so it was really under attack during Black Lives Matter. And I'm sure all of you know in 2017, Trump criticized the protesters on our campus, which is right in front of our house. We lived on campus in a pavilion that Thomas Jefferson built. Basically, the racial tension and all the job loss has led to a narrative. Basically, Trump wanted to make America great again by reviving the manufacturing sector, bringing jobs back, which is what I call economy 1.0, and it's a dead-end street. And this year, of course, you will know, for example, our semiconductor company being forced in some way to onshore invest for the United States, and also companies like Foxconn that try to revive jobs to the United States. They were not really solutions that will solve America's high-income trap. On the other hand, Biden, of course, feels like he is trying to have new solutions to this trap, and that is the big difference between the two. It's really on domestic front. Very few Americans vote on foreign policy, and that is a fact. And in fact, most Chinese Americans support Trump. So we're looking at a very interesting scenario where the new normal in terms of decoupling is not, I think, what the American people are really focused on, U.S.-China relations. But for Taiwan, the real impact is U.S.-China-Taiwan relations. And in this way, I think that unless Senate turns, unless Congress changes, we're really looking not at a whole change of narrative. And so the new normal is something that has been deepened by COVID. Because of COVID and Wuhan virus, as Trump likes to call it, I think the narrative has deepened that China is the biggest threat to the United States. And I think Biden will be quite different in that he will try to balance it by focusing more on the allies and partners. And he's much more sophisticated about what I call the China dilemma that Taiwan faces, the United States faces. He will have a more sophisticated way of thinking about it in working closely with allies. And that may be good and bad for Taiwan, but overall, it is a slight change than where we are now. And we will face the same dilemma, which is to deepen economic relations with China while focusing on U.S. as a security guarantor.
So it seems to me that the change is inevitable, whether it's Biden or Trump re-election. Sean, you are now the vice president of a very important think tank. What are you thinking in terms of corresponding to a change that's inevitable, and what would be some of the things that the citizens of Republic of China, Taiwan should consider? And maybe followed by Leo from an M-Chan's point of view.
Well, I'm not American, so I can't really vote, right? But then the thing is that, I kind of agree with Shirley, because very few Americans that I know, including all my buddies and friends, they vote for president because of foreign policy. So I don't know if there are that many people voted for Trump or Biden, maybe Trump, because of Taiwan, to be very honest with you. I really don't know if there are that many people. So when we look at these things, we tend to look at the U.S. presidential election, we tend to look at it from a Taiwan perspective. But we should really probably try to look at the whole thing from an American perspective. That's why I encourage a lot of our analysts to say, why don't you tell people in Taiwan how the Americans think, right? That's most important. A lot of people, you turn on TV, you watch talk show, everybody was talking about Trump is gonna win, Biden's gonna win, and people start making bets. But these are all our perspective. It doesn't really count, right? So, a lot of things that we're talking about, for example, I believe you were just saying Black Lives Matters. I'm a total supporter for Black Lives Matters, because I have friends. I have a lot of African American friends. I believe this is a universal value. This is a common belief that's shared by people across different ethnic, and also different region. So things like this, gender equality, racial equality, a lot of things, climate change. All these things are the stuff that we should look at. So obviously, China should be a big factor, probably a bigger factor than Taiwan affecting US voters. And to be very honest with you, from my perspective, if the cross-strait tension can somehow be diffused, I think that helps. Whether it's Trump or Biden, as far as I'm concerned, you don't make Taiwan become a flashpoint, during the U.S.-China competition or even the new Cold War. So long as you don't let Taiwan become a flashpoint between Taiwan and U.S. and China, I'm okay with it. Okay, so this is from when I look at these things. Yeah, I just say, Biden, if he gets reelected, maybe he will shift his focuses, probably from Taiwan to trades, for human rights, from a lot of different things. And somehow the burden, obviously there are people in Taiwan who wants Taiwan to be the center of attention, but that also gives a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of pressure. You talk about military, all kinds of pressure. And I'm not sure if this kind of pressure is actually good for Taiwan, to be very honest with you. So whether it's Trump or Biden, as long as Taiwan is safe, I think that's okay with me.
Yeah. Leo, you talk about a potential BTA, bilateral trade agreement. Is a new administration or a re-election of Trump making this more likely? And what is the foundation of a presumption that a BTA will happen in the near future, and from an entrance perspective on trade and several issues?
So let me just go to your first question before, because I was looking forward to answer that. The reason people can't tell who's going to win between Trump and Biden, and the reason this election is so interesting to watch, and I'm, as you heard, I can't vote either, is because people who support Trump don't admit it. There's probably a lot of Trump supporters here and nobody put up their hand. And that's what makes it so tricky. So I'm not going to call it in any means. But going back to the issues, the one thing I want to say is I totally agree with you. It is the Congress and the Senate that makes a big difference. And that's relevant to our trade negotiations with the US as well. When I first went to the US on the American Chamber of Trade, our CO mission, or it used to be called our door knock mission, we go to see Congress and Senate. And I first went in 2017. And at that time, we had a lot of support in the Congress for Taiwan issues. That had changed, and much less so for the Senate. But that has gradually changed over the years to where support for Taiwan is really bipartisan now. And it doesn't matter who you talk to, it seems to be across the board, people recognize that Taiwan has an important future in terms of America's policy towards Asia. And that's very important for us. And I think that that's why I'm so optimistic, whether it's Trump or Biden in the next administration, that Taiwan has a very high chance of working towards a bilateral free trade agreement. I think the issue that Taiwan has to deal with is the pork and beef one. Once that's dealt with, I think you will see TIFA talks starting next year, and I'm very optimistic about that. Doesn't matter who wins.
Next year, wow, that's a bold assumption. Yeah, Steve, let me ask you a question specifically about internet and social media. You created YouTube, which give voice to billions of people to express themselves. But today's social media also becomes a platform for fake news, which is basically disrupting democracy. And then there were a school of theory that also talk about, the age of surveillance, government watching and monitoring people. What is your thoughts on this? Have you thought about today's YouTube becoming the way it is, and how, what it is that you are thinking when you see something like this happening every day?
It's a good question, right? I mean, I think when I was still at the helm of YouTube, when I was still running it, when I was still interviewing with the Google or YouTube hat on, it was always referring to things like the Digital Millennium Copyrights Act. It's referring to ways that, to be honest, YouTube isn't responsible for user-generated content as long as it's not copyrighted content, as long as it's not adult content, as long as the audio and video passes through the filters. It doesn't matter what type of content that is on YouTube. It could keep it up. It's really then, after that, it becomes the codes within the companies, and they vary quite a bit from Google to Facebook to YouTube to Twitter. And do you want to monetize on this content? Do you want to not monetize on this content? And so, during that sort of 2005, 2006 period when YouTube first started, everybody was using the DMCA to say, we're going to keep whatever content that's uploaded, we're going to keep it there, and there's no way to take it down. And there was no legal way to take this content down. But as time progressed, and as user-generated content, as services like YouTube became the norm, the mainstream on how people are receiving their news, they're no longer watching news from their TV stations. They're looking at it from their subscription channels on YouTube. They're getting it from their subscription feeds on Twitter. Then it starts becoming problematic as you start getting more and you start have targeted marketing, targeted advertising. You're going to get narrower into that bandwidth. And so I think at this point, there needs to be, it will unlikely be enforced from the government perspective. It needs to be more from the grounds up, from the users, and more importantly, from the executive decisions made within these companies. I think that I think YouTube and Google are two of the companies that I think have taken the lead on saying we're going to take it upon ourselves to be able to look at this content, filter this content, and take this content down. In terms of when I was there, this would have been a violation of just the protection that YouTube had. So as long as you're looking at the type of content, then you're supposed to be responsible for whatever is up there. These are actually judgment calls that you need to decide. Do you keep this piece of video up? Do you keep it down? When you do take pieces of video down, you're punishing the users from uploading that. As soon as you take them down a few times, the entire account is deleted. I mean, they start becoming difficult decisions to be making, especially when you have thousands of people that are looking at all the pieces of content that's being uploaded every single minute. And to be able to make an objective decision on whether this piece of content should stay up, and should stay up in what countries should it stay up, where was it uploaded from. There's a lot of variables that are there, but I think that Google and YouTube are taking, and Twitter, I think these companies are starting to take the steps in the right direction on protecting what's up there and taking down what shouldn't be up there. And that was something that, I mean, again, honestly, when I was at YouTube, I didn't take that decision. I wouldn't have gone down that step because it's too difficult to do.
What's the line there? How do you decide what's, erupting social order?
That's always the hard part, right?
Right.
I mean, there's very different ideas of what should be permitted, what shouldn't. It's all relative based on what country you're from, what socioeconomic class you're from. Things are allowed in, even when it comes to just commercials and TVs, movies, talk shows, radios, it's all different depending on whatever country you're from. And so, you have cases where, when I was there was something about 72 videos that were uploaded that was offensive to the royalty in Thailand, right? And it's illegal to do in Thailand, so do you take this down or not? The content was being uploaded from outside of Thailand. Do you take it down for people that are outside of Thailand, or do you just take it down for the entire site? I mean, it's just one use case, but a lot of this continues to happen, and you need to make this judgment call objectively on every single piece of content that's coming online. And I think it's a very difficult.
Please. Yeah, of course. Charles, feel free to. Yeah.
If I could ask you a question instead of talking. I'm very interested in what you just said because actually the class I'm teaching now at Zhengda is AI and ethics. And so we've been talking about privacy and basically surveillance capitalism as one of the books that we're reading. So you just said something that really, I think my students who actually paid and came here would be very interested to hear you say.
I'll refund them. No problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So what they would be interested to ask you is, do you think it is really not in the purview of the government to regulate? And one of the issues of the high income trap too is monopolization and financialization. As companies like Google get bigger and bigger, is it the government's role to actually break them up and also to look into privacy to reflect what the people want? And you're saying that it should be bottom up. How long would it take before it takes over our world in a way that will be too late? How much can it be bottom up? How much do we need representative government to actually help us regulate and so that banks are not too large? And of course, coming from the group, several people who are here helped me make the investment in Alibaba. We're looking at Ant Financial coming up soon. I mean, the power of the government is enormous in East Asia. And do you really think that there is no role from top down?
Well, I think it's I'll say this, is when I was still at YouTube, there was a deck that we had to put together, which was handed to everybody that was reviewing the content that was being uploaded and flagged on YouTube. And how does this person decide whether or not to take this video down, punish the user, or keep it up? And there was a 500-page document about but you can only describe so much. I mean, you're trying to define creativity of every future piece of content being uploaded on YouTube, and trying to use this document to be able to define an absolute, true or false, keep it up or not. And it's in one sense, it's an excuse to say it's difficult. It is a very difficult question to answer, right? Even at the time when there was just 3 of us that were reviewing the content, we wouldn't all agree on whether or not we keep this piece of content up or down. There's definitely a large area that we can all agree, this does not deserve to be on our site. But there is this band in the middle. I mean, I think same thing when it comes to, I think, even a lot of the issues regarding the election coming up. I mean, both sides are flagging content that says this should be taken down. This is fake news. But in some senses, I mean, all news is a little fake. I mean, it's to what point is it?
Not to grill anymore. This becomes, let's interview Steve. Can I just ask one more to follow up? Do you think the government's connection with private sector in the United States, DC's been calling Mark Zuckerberg and people in. Do you think that's justify how much they're trying to do? And the other thing that you've been in Taiwan for 2 years, has the Taiwanese government been actually actively engaging with the private sector? I know Jason can speak to that as well.
Well, on the private sector side, I think I came back using this Gold Card program that they initiated 1.5 years ago. And the idea, this was before everything with COVID happened, the idea was that let's start attracting a lot of these entrepreneurs. But outside of that, also artists, engineers, entrepreneurs to come back to Taiwan and to be able to make it easy for them to gain entry, for their family to gain entry into Taiwan, and hopefully establish themselves and then in turn create their next startup here in Taiwan. I do think that, fast forward 18 months with what's happening with COVID, with all the people that are coming back, we're getting so many more entrepreneurs in here right now that I think this is, right now is an opportune time with the Gold Card program. Many of us are working with the various ministries within the Taiwanese government, and there is, I think, this idea that there's a ticking clock that we have to do something within the next 12 to 18 months if Taiwan wants to take advantage of this period.
Charles, you are a venture capitalist, and where do you see the opportunities?
Well, so since I'm the youngest here, actually I have a question directed to all of you guys.
You have to
since
answer.
I'm the youngest here, I think it's part of my duty here to represent the younger generation to express some of their concerns and questions in the current unstable world. So it seems like we live in very unique and uncertain times with rapid change in technology, Sino-US confrontation, a very worrying, I would say, US election up and coming, environmental issues, and an ongoing global pandemic. Many of the younger generation feel as if the knowledge, values, and skills that they've acquired in school or at work won't be as useful in a short period of time. Within these complex economic, societal, and political interactions, including generation gaps and uneven distribution of wealth and potential even war. How do you guys think it would be how do you guys think a younger generation can better prepare themselves? And
This is a question to panelists?
yeah, the question's a discussion to all
you
of you.
You want to take a step first?
Topic for this panel because there's a big question. I often had a chance to give a speech at a lot of campus and to a lot of students. I always think, look, basic training in school, meaning that you go to college, you have a good professors like people that we have here, it's very important. Grades, do they matter? Yeah, maybe. When you go interview for a job, they look at the grades, oh, it's pretty good. But I guess the most important is the training that you see in your school, in campus. I mean, a lot of things that we learn on the job. I mean, I went to law school, but my first job was actually investment banking. I learned on the job. I was like, I don't know much about banking, but then I still learn. So focusing on your study is still very important for any young people when you're still in school. But when you go out, you're in a job, I guess a lot of things that, a lot of principles that are still the same now or versus 10 years or 20 years ago. I mean, dedication, hard working, all those spirits. And a lot of time that is, when we're in, let's say when I was in investment banking, a lot of stuff that we do is manual labor, a lot of time, putting up, just putting together a lot of the presentation. It's just all very tedious work. But now you have a lot of, for example, you have social media, you have all kinds of Google, you have everything that you can use to gather information. So it's actually a lot easier probably from my perspective to do a lot of basic job right now. But still, it requires your dedication, it requires your focus. You can't just go on a job and then spend 3 months and then decide to move on. And that just doesn't work. Whether it's now or 10 years ago, it just doesn't work. So I still believe that a lot of the old principles still apply, even at today's changing world, changing environment. All right.
The thing about COVID, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about, is that it really is a disease that has impacted the younger people particularly hard. The people who are more likely to be stricken by COVID are the older ones, but the ones who are suffering most from the economic slowdown are the young people. So it's kind of a very unfortunate thing in that sense, is a sacrifice that the younger generation has to make to keep the older ones alive, and I don't know how that's going to develop in the future. But I also think it's a fundamental shift that's happening. The way we work now, so much more working at home, so much more working through technology, those changes are really beneficial to the younger people. We never worked that much in that context where everything was done over internet and everything was done via Zoom and all the other Microsoft platforms. I think that's so much more to your advantage. So I think for the young people, you have to search what you are good at and try to use that to change the world.
If any dose of inspiration on this?
Well, I think this is related to just what was said here. Is that I think here in Taiwan, we just started a new startup ourselves, and it's just focused on. We don't think COVID's going to be, or the team, the investors, the advisors behind the company. We don't think COVID's going to be over for 2020, 2021, 2022. I mean, with the vaccination, with the amount of problems that you're having, you're going to start seeing with vaccination, especially in the U.S. with a lot of the geopolitical, the socioeconomic circles that you have in the U.S. You're just going to have problems from some of the earlier studies that's come up, and so especially to like you mentioned, especially to the kids that are coming back here to Taiwan now that have gone through 5-6 months of quarantine, and these 18-month-year-olds, they're not used to seeing other kids. When they see other kids, they're running away from them on the playground, right? And I think that this is going to just be an interesting coming up another 18 months.
Shirley?
I'd like to go back to Jason's questions. I think one of the core issues...
I think Sherry wants to say something. Let her say something first. Shirley.
Oh, Sherry.
I'm Shirley.
Oh, sorry.
No, thanks. I appreciate everybody sharing personal story, but I don't have a lot of sharing on the personal front, although I've changed career dramatically. But I have two sort of professional, I guess you call insight. First is I've been teaching the last 10 years since I became a professor in Beijing, Shenzhen, Charlottesville, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. This is really what I do more than half of my time, teaching at all 4 places every year, which is very challenging. I have to take every summer, every holiday. Basically, so people always ask me, and my long-term goal is to write about teaching Chinese and teaching Americans. And so it's a really interesting book, as it turns out, but that's in practice. But the second part that I'm really happy to say is I've signed on to be a senior advisor for Talent Circulation Alliance, a venture that is started by AIT and the Taiwan government, and III is here. Thank you very much. I think it's such a wonderful idea to think about what could be done. And I think this is where in the last few weeks, I really came back here to both teach and do this project, which is about internationalizing our higher education. One of the biggest issues I find in these 4 places that I teach, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the United States, is that teachers want to teach what they're trained to do, not what the market wants. So it's all supply side. And I'm sure all of you will have the same, young people would say that even though we're a wealthy society, our education system is from 30 years ago. Our system is not very different than China. The GDP per capita is so big, such a big gap, but Japan, South Korea, Taiwan's education system is still far closer, much closer to the Chinese system than to the United States system. And there's a lot of reason behind it. I won't go into it, but the key thing is our education system needs to move towards what the market need, but what the market need is not programming skills. And III offers programming skills. Our students can take 6 months and get lots of jobs. Even if they study geography, they'll go do programming. And myself, having been trained at nothing, I went to a school that trained me in nothing, and then I went to Goldman Sachs and they trained me. And then I went to get a PhD, then I got real training. So I realized actually the problem is nothing I teach any of our students will be useful in 5 years' time. It is only to help them train critical thinking and learn to deal with adversities in life, starting with COVID. If we cannot help them learn those skills, nothing will help them because they all have to learn on the job in the new economy. So I think that's the key thing, that if Taiwan could take the COVID opportunity to think about what's wrong with the supply system education, then we can do something in the long term for the younger generation.
Thank you very much. That's great. I'm aware of time. We have 5 minutes left before Andrew comes online. So we can either open one question to the floor or any panelist thing we can use this time. Is there any burning question from the floor who would like to ask panelists right now? Please raise your hand. Okay, everybody's still trying to kind of digest. Or anything that a panelist wants to kind of say before? Well, you ask questions. You are a panelist. You shouldn't confuse.
Well, I like to express.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
So I was wanting to go back to Jason's questions. So I think one of the core issues of Taiwan is actually the limits of a small region. So I think Taiwan traditionally has always been forced in a position to specialize in certain industries rather than develop as a full economy. And I'd like to mention the success of Hong Kong and Singapore, for example. They all come with sacrifices in social stability and tech secrecy. And so naturally, I think it's very hard for small regions to continue to maintain such tech superiority. So therefore, my opinion is that I think Taiwan needs to open up a lot more in terms of financial, legal, or legal process, basically. So, and I think also the success of Taiwan's pandemic approach has also opened up a lot of opportunities for capital inflow, and I believe right now it's the best time to do so.
Oh, there's one burning question right there. Yeah, please go ahead and direct your question to a specific panelist so we can sort of condense this for last 3 minutes.
University of South California and so on. And however, there are a lot of challenging the regulations between countries and countries, especially Taiwan is not
Country, yeah.
The diplomatic status is quite challenging for us. And what's your opinion about this, about our education? Because sometimes diplomatic related to the internet, how to build a connection with.
So the question is how to build international connections with other universities or other education entities. Maybe Shirley can say something, but YouTube also becomes sort of the source of education now. Steve, maybe you can also take a stab on this a little bit.
Thank you, Eureka. Actually, we have a USC student sitting right there, Savannah. So building a connection with USC for NTU is wonderful. If you look at the number on the research front of inflow, what we call inbound and outbound circulation, Taiwan really is at the cusp. It's really not very international. So despite how much money we put into internationalization, most of you, if we do a perception survey, which is what my team wants to do in the next 12 months, most people think internationalization of education means learn English. And I'm sure you know that's not what is actually internationalization. So the real point about the revamping of the education is, you're right, absolutely. Language is a socialization process. Unless there are a lot of people who don't speak Chinese on your campus. You're not going to do it. We offer English classes all over the most important universities in Taiwan. And anytime you go to this class, first class is 120 people, second class, 20. As long as they see the syllabus, oh my gosh, English reading, no. This happens actually in Beijing as well. So it's not something unique to us. So I have that comparative lens. But I would just say that the reason that it is so difficult to push English education is because we don't have enough foreign students. And we don't have enough foreign students, maybe, Eureka, is because we're not a country. But if you remember, and my husband remember 30 years ago, he learned Chinese in Taipei because you couldn't go to China. And once in the 70s, you can go to China. We lost all of the opportunities to teach foreigners English. And now that's all coming back. We are actually here to get an MOU signed between NCCU and UVA in the next few months. So we're working really hard. It's very bureaucratic, you're right, very rigid. Liberalization of finance, education, and banking. All of this is very important. And I think that this is something, it's good that everyone recognizes an issue, and we need to put pressure on the system to do it much more quickly, because COVID is an unusual opportunity for us. As most students in the United States right now, in the last few years, fewer and fewer Americans want to go to China to study. But more and more Americans are studying Chinese. You know what that means? They have to study Chinese somewhere when they study abroad. And it's a huge opportunity for us.
It's not just COVID. What you're seeing now, a lot of the centers, the Stanford centers, the other university centers in Beijing, because of the dilemma between the US and China, it's unclear what's going to happen with those. If the tensions between US and China continue to be as they are, a lot of these university centers, prestigious US university centers in China, are not going to be able to operate. This is an opportunity for Taiwan, particularly because it's Chinese speaking, to kind of fill some of that gap.
We are a country called Republic of China, just in case you guys don't remember. But then, okay, thanks. But I'm not quite sure how much is this sort of internationalization or globalization has to do with our diplomatic relation status, especially within Taiwan. Because I think Shirley mentioned something, I totally agree. You're talking about English classes or classes that requires a lot of English reading. Then you get really, really few students that are willing to go through the entire semester and focus on this stuff. So I have to say, foundation, obviously, unfortunately, foundation is you have to speak English, read and write. So this is rule number 1, 101. You just have to be able to speak, read, and write. So, and then also, I think in the past, we've been thinking, obviously, there are people who are trying to open up a little bit in terms of education, having some university to come over to Taiwan, or maybe allow some sort of joint program. But the rules and the regulation, very conservative. Okay, you're talking about financial regulation, financial industry. We've been talking about financial industry deregulated for 20 years. Okay, 20 years, and I expect it to be even longer. And the same thing also if you look at education, the industry, the same thing it also happened here because the rules and regulation and some of the government bureaucrats is very conservative. So you say why Chicago or Columbia, they can have overseas campus, they can have Singapore or even Middle East or even Hong Kong, but you cannot have that in Taiwan, rules and regulation. So unless we change the rules and regulation and actually the mentality of a lot of government technocrats, otherwise this is very difficult. So that's just my observation on this matter.
Steve, maybe.
Well, I think, coming back from, Silicon Valley, where just companies are started all the time, and trying to do the same here after coming here for the first few months, the rules and regulations in Taiwan make it very difficult to start a company relative to the US. It's become, with all the people that are coming back right now with a gold card, 100 a week, they're trying to start companies, and it's pretty much giving them an instruction manual that's pages thick about, first you go over to Delaware and you create this entity, then you connect it to an entity here in Taiwan, you bridge the two. And all the, how are you gonna go through the British Virgin Islands? Are you going through the Cayman Islands? Where are you gonna do it's just not as easy to start something here in Taiwan as it is in Silicon Valley. And I think what further makes it difficult to start something here in Taiwan is that, for us, we're trying to create a startup here that's creating a service for in a lot of ways for the U.S. and for Europe and for the rest of the world, because of 23 million people in Taiwan is not large enough. And there are just so many more challenges that we've been seeing to be able to do something like this in Taiwan versus what it was like in Silicon Valley. But again, I think looking forward to it is that this is still a golden period right now relative to the other times in Taiwan. So I'd love to be able to take advantage of this now.